A
Imagine
6-year-old girl walked into an animal
a
shelter
6-year-old
and almost
girl who
immediately
walked into a
noticed something
shelter
that everyone else had
and
been
noticed a
walking
dog
past.
everyone
At the
else
very end of the
ignored.
kennel row lay
He
a
was
dog
too
so
weak to
thin it was
stand,
hard to look at for long.
and his
His
food
ribs
bowl
showed
had
through
been
his fur, and
untouched
he
for
barely
days.
moved as he rested against the wall.
Visitors
A
would
bowl of
stop
food sat right beside
and walk
him,
away,
untouched. Visitors
but she
stopped there for a
didn't.
moment, shook their
She
heads,
stepped
and
inside the
quietly
kennel,
moved on. But this
sat
girl
down,
didn't. What happened next
and
would
held out
later
a
be
piece of
replayed
food in
again
her
and
hand.
again on the
For a
shelter's
moment,
security
nothing
cameras, because
happened,
none of the workers could
and then the
believe what they
dog
were
slowly
seeing,
lifted
because this
his
dog
head
hadn't eaten for a long
and
time.
ate.
The shelter staff had tried everything, but day after day the bowl remained full, while the dog slowly grew weaker. The girl's name is Alice, and she is 6 years old. Alice has always been a little different from other children her age. She is quiet, patient, and often feels more comfortable around animals than around people. At school, she sometimes struggles to make friends, not because she is unkind, but because she speaks softly and prefers calm moments instead of noisy games. Animals, however, seem to understand her immediately. There is a neighbor who lives a few houses away from Alice's family, an older man who travels often for work. Whenever he leaves town, Alice is the one who walks over to his yard to help take care of his dog. She fills the bowl, brushes his fur, and sits beside him on the porch while he rests his head against her knee. The dog listens to her in a way that surprises even the neighbor, but Alice's parents have always been careful about one thing. They don't want a dog at home. They worry it would be too much responsibility for a 6-year-old child. So when Alice's school organized a visit to Greenwood Animal Shelter, her parents agreed. It was just a field trip, a chance for the children to learn about animals and maybe help the shelter by bringing drawings and toys. None of them expected that the visit would change 2 lives forever. While the other children walked excitedly through the building, stopping at every kennel and pointing at the playful puppies jumping against the gates, Alice kept thinking about the dog at the end of the hallway, the thin one, the one that hadn't even lifted his head when people passed. After a few minutes, she quietly walked back toward that kennel. The dog was still lying in the same place. The bowl of food was still untouched. Alice stood there watching him for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised one of the volunteers nearby. She opened the gate and stepped inside the kennel. The volunteer started to say something, but Alice had already sat down on the floor beside the dog, leaving enough space so he wouldn't feel trapped or afraid. For several seconds, nothing happened. The dog didn't move. He didn't even look at her. Alice reached slowly toward the bowl of food, picked up a small piece, and held it gently in her hand. She didn't push it toward him. She simply waited. The security camera above the hallway recorded the moment clearly. The dog slowly lifted his head. For the first time since arriving at the shelter, he looked at someone with real attention. Then, very carefully, he leaned forward and took the food from Alice's hand. The volunteer watching from the hallway froze, because that dog had refused every meal many days, but now he was eating from a child's hand. When the shelter staff reviewed the footage later that evening, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Several of them replayed the moment again and again, watching the same quiet scene where a starving dog finally accepted food. From that day forward, Alice returned to the shelter every afternoon after school with one of her parents. She would sit beside the dog and feed him small pieces of food from her hand while speaking to him softly. At first, he only ate a little, but slowly, day after day, the bowl beside him started to empty. The dog began to regain strength. Within 2 weeks, he started standing when Alice arrived. Within a month, he wagged his tail. During that time, the shelter staff also discovered the rest of his story. The dog's name was Atlas. He had belonged to a retired firefighter named Daniel Harris. For nearly 8 years, the two of them had been inseparable. Daniel had rescued Atlas as a puppy during a call to a house fire, and from that day forward, the dog followed him everywhere. But several months earlier, Daniel had passed away suddenly. Family members tried to care for Atlas, but the dog never adapted to the new home. Eventually, he ran away and was found weeks later near a highway outside the city, thin, exhausted, and completely alone. Atlas had been found late in the evening on the side of a highway just outside the city. A driver had noticed him standing near the edge of the road. They thought the dog might run, but he didn't. He just stood there, thin, exhausted, and completely still, as if he no longer had the strength to care where he was. When animal control arrived, Atlas didn't resist. He didn't bark. He didn't try to run. He simply allowed himself to be led into the vehicle, lowering his head the entire time. When they brought him to the shelter, the staff immediately noticed how severe his condition was. His ribs were visible, his movements were slow, and his eyes carried a kind of emptiness that experienced workers recognized right away. This wasn't just hunger. This was something deeper. They gave him food that same night. He didn't touch it. The next morning, the bowl was still full. By the second day, the staff began to worry. They tried different types of food, different feeding schedules, quieter rooms, even hand feeding. Nothing worked. Atlas didn't react to anyone. People would stop in front of his kennel, some of them whispering, laughing, others shaking their heads in disbelief at how thin he was. No one understood what was really happening. The shelter arranged a full medical examination. They checked for injuries, infections, internal problems, anything that could explain his condition. The results came back clear. Physically, he could recover, but emotionally, something was broken. The veterinarian explained it quietly to the staff. Severe stress, loss. He's shutting down. Days passed, and Atlas grew weaker. The staff continued trying, but each attempt ended the same way. The bowl stayed full, and the dog remained still. By the time Alice walked into the shelter that day, Atlas had already begun to fade in a way that no medication could fix. Because what he had lost couldn't be replaced with food or treatment. When Alice heard that story, she sat quietly beside Atlas and gently placed her hand on his head. "You're not alone now," she said softly. From that day on, she didn't miss a single visit. Every afternoon after school, Alice came back to the shelter. Sometimes she brought small pieces of food. Sometimes she just sat beside Atlas and talked to him in that same calm, steady voice. She never rushed him, never forced him, and never seemed disappointed on the days he ate a little less. But little by little, things began to change. Atlas started lifting his head the moment he saw her. Then he began to stand. Then, one afternoon, his tail moved for the first time. The staff noticed it immediately. "He's waiting for her," one of them said quietly. Weeks passed, and the routine stayed the same. Alice would sit beside him, feed him from her hand, and stay longer than anyone expected a 6-year-old to have the patience for. At home, she talked about Atlas constantly. At first, her parents listened without saying much. They had always been firm about not having a dog, but now something felt different. They could see it in the way Alice spoke, in the way she smiled when she mentioned his name. One evening, after another visit, Alice looked at them and asked the question again. "Can he come home with us?" This time, they didn't answer right away. A few days later, they went back to the shelter together. And before Alice even realized what was happening, the paperwork was already being prepared. Atlas was going home. The first weeks were quiet. Alice stayed close to him, giving him space when he needed it, sitting beside him when he rested, and continuing the same gentle routine she had started in the shelter. They took him to the veterinarian regularly, making sure his recovery stayed on track. Slowly, steadily, Atlas began gaining weight. His energy returned, his movements became stronger, and the tired, empty look in his eyes started to disappear. Month by month, he changed. His ribs were no longer visible. His coat became healthier. And most importantly, he began to act like a dog again. He ran in the yard. He chased a ball. He followed Alice everywhere. Every morning, he walked with her to the front of the house when it was time for school. And every afternoon, he was already waiting near the door before she even stepped inside. Alice changed too. At school, her teachers began to notice that she was more open, more confident, more willing to talk and laugh with other children. She still preferred quiet moments, but now she wasn't alone during recess. Sometimes she told stories about Atlas. Sometimes other kids asked to see him. And slowly, things became easier for her. At home, their days were filled with simple moments. Playing in the yard, sitting together in the evenings, walking through the neighborhood with Atlas proudly trotting beside her. Even the neighbor's dog, the one Alice used to take care of, became part of their routine. The two dogs learned to trust each other, running together across the grass while Alice watched and laughed. It wasn't something dramatic. It wasn't something loud. But it was everything they both needed. Because the dog who had once stopped eating had found a reason to live again. And the girl who had struggled to be understood had found someone who understood her without words. And in the end, they didn't just save each other. They gave each other a life that neither of them could have found alone. Every morning, he walked with her to the front of the house when it was time for school. And every afternoon, he was already waiting near the door before she even stepped inside. Alice changed too. At school, her teachers began to notice that she was more open, more confident, more willing to talk and laugh with other children. She still preferred quiet moments, but now she wasn't alone during recess. Sometimes she told stories about Atlas. Sometimes other kids asked to see him. And slowly, things became easier for her. At home, their days were filled with simple moments. Playing in the yard, sitting together in the evenings, walking through the neighborhood with Atlas proudly trotting beside her. Even the neighbor's dog, the one Alice used to take care of, became part of their routine. The two dogs learned to trust each other, running together across the grass while Alice watched and laughed. It wasn't something dramatic. It wasn't something loud. But it was everything they both needed. Because the dog who had once stopped eating had found a reason to live again. And the girl who had struggled to be understood had found someone who understood her without words. And in the end, they didn't just save each other. They gave each other a life that neither of them